wondered about this particular thing? Because it turns out that that thing is real.
Ancient astronaut theorists say yes.
That thing I referred to earlier? Well, it's happening, and it will destroy us all. Someone has to stop this thing. And that someone is you.
And I was notified about this in 2007, and I've heard about this town ever since from 3 or 4 different insiders, and you probably can see where this is going. Paradise, California.
In humanity's search for life outside our solar system, one of the best places to look is Alpha Centauri, a system containing the 3 nearest stars beyond the Sun. A new study that has involved monitoring of Alpha Centauri for more than a decade by NASA's Chandra X-ray Observatory provides encouraging news about one key aspect of planetary habitability. It indicates that any planets orbiting the 2 brightest stars in the Alpha Centauri system are likely not being pummeled by large amounts of X-ray radiation from their host stars. Alpha Centauri is a triple star system located just over 4 light-years, or about 25 trillion miles, from Earth. While this is a large distance in terrestrial terms, it is 3 times closer than the next nearest Sun-like star. The stars in the Alpha Centauri system include a pair called A and B that we'll call AB, which orbit relatively close to each other. Alpha Centauri is a near twin of our Sun in almost every way, including age, while Alpha Centauri B is somewhat smaller and dimmer, but still quite similar to the Sun. The third member, Alpha Centauri C, also known as Proxima, is a much smaller red dwarf star that travels around the AB pair in a much larger orbit that takes it more than 10,000 times farther from the AB pair than the Earth-Sun distance. Proxima currently holds the title of the nearest star to Earth, although AB is a very close second. The Chandra data reveal that the prospects for life in terms of current X-ray bombardment are actually better around Alpha Centauri A than for the Sun, and Alpha Centauri B fares only slightly worse. Proxima, on the other hand, is a type of active red dwarf star known to frequently send out dangerous flares of X-ray radiation, and is likely hostile to life.
But whether an other Earth exists, what would its discovery mean for the future of humanity? Could it be that ancient structures throughout the world were designed to function together as part of a massive energy grid? And did the architects intentionally leave behind information for us to find once we had the technological knowledge to recognize this system? But why? After World War II and the Roswell incident, military personnel around the world had become aware of this UFO connection.
So here we have an ancient grid structure, probably built by extraterrestrials, possibly to power their craft, that's now being reconstructed today by the military.
What were the alien architects trying to tell us?
Extraterrestrials knew that at some point in our evolution, an technologically advanced society would stumble across all of these ancient sites and see their correlation, thus forcing us to take into consideration that some type of extraterrestrials showed our ancestors where to build these things, not for them, but for us.
the grid itself may in fact be a source of unconventional energy that we are not necessarily utilizing with our technology now. An advanced intelligent race wanted to leave something behind for us to discover that would give us the clues to a greater level of science than we now understand.
It could be that this master architect sought not only to influence the Earth, but also to connect the Earth to something greater or beyond our imagination. Perhaps this grid even extends out into the stars, and the world grid of the Earth connects with the grid of other planets as well, and then integrates the Earth into a huge colony, if you will, or integrated circuit throughout the cosmos.
The universe, for billions of years, has been lit by the fire of countless stars. In these stellar cauldrons, hydrogen nuclei are fused together to form helium nuclei, releasing energy that lights the heavens. Can we build the technology to harness this awesome energy on Earth? As we approach our planet, that is exactly what's happening today. Far beneath these clouds lies the National Ignition Facility, located at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory in Livermore, California. This facility has been built to bring star power to Earth. It is the world's largest and highest energy laser system. Containing 192 laser beams, NIF will explore controlled nuclear fusion to ensure global security, enable sustainable clean energy, and advance our understanding of the universe. 85 feet tall, the laser and target area building is the size of 3 football fields. Inside are 2 parallel laser bays, each containing 96 beam lines. In this animation, which is millions of times slower than real time, we will follow the process for creating a miniature star in the target chamber by riding along with some of the laser beams. The process starts by first energizing the laser amplifiers in the 2 laser bays by dumping electrical energy stored in capacitors into flash lamps. They convert the energy to light that is absorbed by the laser glass in the amplifiers. Later, when the laser pulses pass through the glass, they will extract this energy, thereby increasing the laser beam energy. Our trip with the laser beams begins in the master oscillator room, where a very low energy laser pulse is created. This pulse is only 20 billionths of a second long in duration, which is a beam of light about 20 feet long. It's amplified and then split into 48 laser pulses, which are carried over to the 2 laser bays using fiber optic cables. Here, the 48 pulses are amplified in a preamplifier by a factor of about 10 billion. Then they're split into 192 pulses and sent into the main laser system. As we track 8 of these beams through the facility, you can see the path of the beams highlighted in red. The first amplification occurs in the power amplifier. It has 5 glass slabs that were energized by the powerful flash lamps. Then they travel to the main laser cavity that directs the laser light back and forth 4 times through 11 sets of laser amplifier glass in the main amplifier system. This gives the laser beams another boost of energy. During this time, optical components ensure that the beams maintain their required pulse shape, quality, and spatial uniformity. On the final pass through the optical system, the laser light is allowed to exit and travel back through the beam lines and up to the power amplifier once more to pick up even more energy before heading down the long stretch to the switch yard. In total, the energy of the laser beams is increased a quadrillion times as they travel more than 1,500 meters from the master oscillator room to the target chamber. In the switch yard, the parallel bundles of beams are rearranged into a conical configuration. That's so they can be focused into the center of the target chamber and onto the target assembly. The assembly holds the spherical fuel pellet containing hydrogen. Here you see the 8 beams split into 2 groups of 4 beams each, one group traveling up and the other traveling down, heading for equidistant entry ports on the target chamber. Finally, the beams pass through the final optics assemblies, which convert the original infrared laser light to ultraviolet. The beams then converge on the 10mm target assembly called a holeron, generating a bath of X-rays. This causes the tiny target sphere to implode and ignite in a controlled, self-sustaining fusion reaction. The same process that powers the stars. This will be the start of a new journey that will bring not only discovery and innovation, but a lasting legacy to the future.
There are 2 billion people in the world that don't have access to regular supplies of energy. If we're going to give them the same quality of living that we enjoy in North America and Europe, they're going to need energy, and we need answers for that. If the future of fusion was here today, it would change the way our energy system works dramatically.
We've only had the fire department of New York come once, where we generated enough smoke to trip off the smoke detectors in the building and have the fire department actually arrive and sort of shoo us out while they ventilated the laboratory. I've been involved in fusion research since graduate school 43 years ago. Columbia University, we work on magnetic fusion, and we're part of the US DOE-funded national program in producing magnetically confined fusion energy. Fusion is the ultimate energy source in the universe. All the stars in the sky, the sun, all of those lighted objects are powered by fusion. The process is really simple. You just take 2 light isotopes, hydrogen usually, bring them together, they react with a nuclear reaction, and they produce 100 times more energy than it takes in order to produce the reaction in the first place. The research on fusion that we're doing today is leading to a future where we could replace coal-fired, oil-fired, gas-fired power plants that we use today with fusion power plants. Publicly funded fusion research and privately funded, which is using investor money, want to develop fusion. We have got to constantly look for ways to make this project move faster.
Access 13.
Right now we're at the Z facility. We're in the high bay that contains the Z accelerator. Z is the largest pulse power accelerator on the planet. It's noisy, it smells like oil. This is not a clean room. This is really how to make stuff happen. So if you were standing here during a shot, it would be your last few moments on Earth. The government is funding most of this work because it's very expensive and requires very big facilities. The Z machine, or the Z accelerator, first began life in 1985 as the particle beam fusion accelerator 2. In about 1996 or 97, there was an opportunity to change the configuration into a Z-pinch driver. The Z machine uses the magnetically driven approach. We have an energy storage section which consists of 36 large capacitor banks, and we're charging those capacitor banks up over about 3 minutes. We charge up the banks to about 20 megajoules of stored energy. Then we discharge all 36 of those Marks banks simultaneously. So we drive these targets from small spatial scales of order my thumbnail or smaller, and we compress them with large currents. And we also impose an externally applied magnetic field that we want to compress. So we're exploring what's called the magnetized target fusion approach.
We store between 22 and 26 megajoules of energy, which is anywhere between 26 and 52 sticks of dynamite. We hear it and we feel it.
When the machine fires, there's a lot of sound, and the ground will roll. I just want you to stand with your feet about 2 feet apart, pointing at the center of the machine so you can feel the roll most effectively.
We've had coat racks fall over in the second floor of a building that's probably about 100 yards away. We've had picture frames fall. There's only one Z machine in the world. Everything else is pretty small compared to Z.
This is what would happen on the machine just after the shot that we witnessed earlier today. And some of that energy appears as high voltages that then flash over on the surface of the water as they find their way back to ground. Fusion in the 50s and 60s and 70s was oversold in that it is much harder than people imagined it to be first. You're trying to study plasmas which only exist for a few nanoseconds. There are a lot of ways that that process can go wrong, and you have to figure out, okay, in that last nanosecond, what's going on? Is it the way we thought it was going to happen, or is something really not quite what we expected? So it's discovery science at the limit of what's possible to do in the laboratory. Our goal, and for much of the world that is studying fusion, is still physics feasibility. And we may be 30 years or 40 years away from a practical fusion energy technology. So you obviously have to really believe in something to dedicate your whole life to it.
The scientific standards that are necessary to get public funding are quite high. The projects that you try to do tend to be the lower risk, longer time scale. Usually the private sector tries faster ways to do fusion. Those companies try to find an approach to fusion that they think is quicker, smaller, will cost less.
Fusion energy has the potential to provide this to the world.
But there's no free lunch in research. It means it's riskier.
General Fusion's had a little north of $100 million invested to date in private capital. Fusion has been pursued a lot by governments for many decades because of the promise of the technology. What is new has been the advent of private companies. The science and R&D that's gone on in the public sector, combined with the pace of innovation we're seeing elsewhere in the economy, when you get new news about fusion, it naturally attracts that attention. So the machine behind me here is a prototype of the compression system that we want to build. So we form plasma and we compress. Now this is a smaller scale than what a power plant would be, so there's no putting plasma into this. This is the compression system, and it's a central tank about 1 meter across that we can fill with molten metal, and then around it are these 14 big pistons, these big drivers that will compress and collapse a cavity that's formed inside that liquid metal. In the formation process, we're already going to be 4 or 5 million degrees C. And the compression is going to heat it another 10, 20 times to 100, 150 million degrees C. The best way to think about how hot that is to look up in the sky and look at the sun. This is really the heart of the Spectre machine. The plasma is formed from down below, and it bubbles up into this sphere here. And then all around what you see are diagnostics for measuring what's going on. So there's large laser systems, and then you see lots of optics here. And those lasers are used to measure things like the temperature of the plasma at different points, or the strength of the magnetic field, or the density of the plasma. It can be very challenging to work on fusion. It works great at the scale of the sun to create the conditions for fusion, but we can't do that here on Earth. We're not even close to being as big. We have to throw a lot of energy at this fuel to get it to 100 million degrees, and then we've got to hold it there long enough to react enough to produce more energy out than we put in.
We've had decade after decade of smaller companies try to find a faster, cheaper way to fusion. None have been successful so far. You presumably have uncovered some new approach, new wrinkle that makes you think that what you're going to do will succeed, whereas other people who tried this approach have failed.
The hardest thing to answer in this game is how soon. What we have a good line on is the next 4 or 5 years. We really want to take what we're doing here at General Fusion at the scale of big subsystems and prototypes like this one and turn that into a large-scale integrated machine, produce conditions like what we need for fusion. So the idea that people have been up against certain problems forever and ever and ever, I don't think is actually true. We've, as a field, and a lot of this goes to really good hard work in the national labs and the public domain, have overcome problems, found solutions, learned more about the science, and made progress step by step by step.
Scientific break-even is getting as much energy out of the system in terms of fusion neutrons as the energy you put into the hot plasma. That's the first hurdle of many. There is one facility in the country that has achieved scientific break-even. It's the National Ignition Facility, the laser facility in California. It's a tremendous accomplishment. And I would say on Z, we hope to be achieving scientific break-even sometime in the next 5 years.
We'll need energy from somewhere. And if we don't get that energy, then the quality of life will suffer.
We want to have an alternative. May not be the best idea in the world to continue to burn fossil fuels at the rate we're burning. So, I mean, one has to do something. One can't just give up.
We as a community have created a lot of the physics and understanding that we need in order to build a power plant. The blank spaces in the map that need to be filled in are a lot smaller than they used to be.
If we look at the strides that have been made in clean energy, such as solar and wind and biofuels in the last 2 decades, it's just been stunning. The United States isn't investing enough in energy technologies writ large, not just fusion. The funding for all forms of energy should go up, especially clean forms.
The research on fusion that we're doing today is leading to a future where we have fusion-powered electric generating plants to meet our need as a high-tech industrialized society.
All right, if there are, in fact, aliens in our cosmic neighborhood, researchers at MIT say they know how to make first contact. Those researchers say all we need is a giant laser.
Now, whether that's a stellar idea, we don't know, but it is the second time this week that local researchers have suggested that there is life out there. These researchers at MIT say the key to communicating with aliens is lasers. Shoot a megawatt laser through a telescope like the one you see here, and they say it will produce a light strong enough to reach extraterrestrials. The researchers say lasers of this magnitude have been built, but the telescope technology isn't available yet. And by the way, one footnote here, there's still no actual proof, of course, that there are aliens out there even to see the light.
Seems like a terrible idea.
A little bit of a leap. Scientists at Harvard, though, believe that yes, aliens could exist and may be responsible for this unusual space rock that we talked about last night. The rock they call Oumuamua is the first object ever observed from outside our solar system. Harvard astronomers believe it could be a tool that the aliens are using to spy on us. Boy, are they disappointed. The scientists acknowledge there's also a possibility that the rock is nothing more than space debris.
They're watching right now going, they said Oumuamua wrong.
Oh, well, they got me.
I just don't think it's a great idea to invite people to our planet.
Or disturb them wherever they are.
Yeah, I think that's a bad idea.
The conversation continues.
That's the preface. Now let's get into the meat of this thing. Some of the humans that they deal with routinely in our military-industrial complex are people who look pretty much just like us. And they might have subtle differences, but not that many. Now, one of the people, I've been tracking this group for many, many years, okay? And I'm going to give you guys some new stuff that nobody's heard about these folks before. These are people who look like us for the most part. The men are really buff. They have really strong looking bodies. They might be a little bit taller than we are. And if you see them the way they naturally would look, their skin is pretty darn pale. It's a little bit too pale, like it looks a little bit too white. And they have white hair, which is another strange thing. If you see them in their native form, their eyes will either be a dark blue or a violet color, which we do not have. And then another interesting thing is that their pupil is kind of like a diamond shape. It's not reptilian, it's not this vertical slit, but it's a diamond instead of round, okay? So that's gonna look a little creepy. little weird. Another thing about them is that they have a little bit of a serrated edge on the bottom of their teeth. And they have fewer teeth in their mouth than we do. I believe they only have 22 teeth. They kind of have this little scalloped edge on the bottom of their teeth, and also they have a scalloped roof of their mouth. Like our soft palate in the top of our mouth is flat. Theirs is like a cat. It has ridges, really thick, deep ridges. Now these people supposedly, at least what they've claimed, is that they came from Alpha Centauri. So one of the names that I've heard used for them, and I've heard this for many years, is Centaurians, okay? So they are the Centaurians. And there apparently have been treaties where the Centaurians are allowed to walk around in our everyday world. One of the people who has actually talked about this is Paul Hellyer, the former Canadian Minister of Defense, in which he's talking about these people being authorized to walk around in Nevada. And maybe even, there's one case he talks about where they were dressed up like nuns. And so the nun, you know, with the habit and everything, they look a little different. Now normally the Centaurians are going to wear contact lenses to hide the, especially if they have the violet color of their eyes, but definitely the pupils too. They have to wear a snap-in dental plate to hide the serration on the bottom of their teeth. And they might also wear foundational makeup to hide how pale their skin is. Now, it's with heavy heart that I have to talk about this because I knew from Henry Deacon all the way back in 2007 that there was a city, a small town in America, the most important small town in America, in which there was a treaty, a secret treaty with the Centaurians, who, by the way, are non-violent. They're not evil. They're good people. They're actually, if you get to talk to them, they will look you in the eye, and you don't speak. You don't move your mouth. They don't move their mouth. But you have this incredible conversation, and you feel incredibly high. You actually get this like very powerful, euphoric, drug-like effect just from being in their presence. So there was a treaty, and I was notified about this in 2007, and I've heard about this town ever since from 3 or 4 different insiders, and you probably can see where this is going. Paradise, California. Paradise, California is a name I've been hiding for 11 years. And it's the most important small town in the United States where these people were being given safe haven and refuge. Now, there's some weird stuff, okay, that I'm going to tell you, including the fact that Paradise had dentists who were trained in how to treat their teeth because, of course, with the serrated bottom and the wideness, the teeth are wider than ours, and there's fewer of them. And I think there's also something funny about the root structure. They can't just get a normal dentist. Obviously, the dentist would flip out and lose his mind. So they had special people living in Paradise who knew about these folks and were trained on how to handle them and how to deal with them, right? People are going to ask me, how many of these Centaurians were living in Paradise? And the answer is I don't know. From the briefings I've gotten, I would, and this is absolute speculation, it's only a guess, and I would say it's probably at least 500. It might even be a few thousand, I don't really know. What I do know is that I was going to visit Paradise, California at some point. I'd planned on it, and I've never talked about this before. This is a world exclusive, okay? And I'm not making this up. I've got recordings with Henry Deacon going back to 07, 08, 09 that I could dig out where we're talking about Paradise, California. This is nothing new. And I've had 3 other insiders confirm that these treaties exist and that the only 2 cities like this in America were Paradise and someplace in Nevada that we don't even know exactly where it is. So why would this happen? Why would the most important city in America for human extraterrestrials burn down so fast that people died in their car trying to pull out of the driveway, right? And the question that I want to know is, were we on the verge of a disclosure event? Were we on the verge of these Centaurians introducing themselves to us collectively? And did that possibility so anger the cabal that they said, we'll show you guys? Because I've seen photographs, and I'm going to have it in my article if I can dig them up again. of laser beams coming down, igniting these fires. You can see the beam through the smoke and the flames. This was not an accident. This is the HARP stuff where they can create a very fast blowing wind. The Santa Ana wind, which is originally Satana, the satanic wind, right? And they just changed the name to Santa Ana. There is no Saint Anna, you know, they just didn't want it to be Satanas, which is what it was originally called, Satan. Because it blows fire. So the Paradise thing is really upsetting because we've never seen a city get so devastated in the history of America. And so many of these people who are totally innocent and were probably getting ready to risk their lives and come forward and introduce themselves to us, probably many of them have died. And it's also like the cabal saying, if you guys talk again, if you think you're going to talk again, we're going to do this to you again. So I find the whole thing very, very sad.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is just shocking.
So Paradise, so what you're telling us is Paradise City has been decimated completely.
Well, now, they may not have all gotten hit. And I'll tell you another weird thing about the Centaurians. They can't really live above the ground for too long on Earth. They like it here, and of course Paradise, you got redwood trees, you got the forest. It's an amazing wilderness paradise. That's why they named it Paradise, because it was so beautiful. So it would make sense that these people, if they get a treaty, that they would want to live in such a beautiful place, right? The part that we don't really see, though, is that predominantly they live in an underground base. And so what they will have, and again, I'm sorry because this is going to sound like sci-fi, and you're going to have these people, the keyboard jockeys, they're going to be like, ah, David Wilcock, he's so crazy, right? I'm just going to tell you what I know. You can laugh. Sometimes you need to laugh to learn the truth, you know? But they predominantly live in underground bases, and so they will, as part of the treaty, they might be given a house, but then the house will have an elevator shaft that will actually go deep down and then go down to one of these sub-shuttles where they can shuttle over to their underground city. So the house is not necessarily where they live all the time. But then the question is, can they get to their elevator fast enough to get down below where the fire is? How many of them actually died? How many of them burned up? I don't know. You know, the Alliance is in the middle of what they call active operations right now, the final stage of getting ready to defeat the Cabal, so the briefings have dried up. But I would imagine a lot of Centaurians died in this fire, and they couldn't act fast enough because literally, as I said, people are trying to evacuate, and the fire was so fast they didn't even have time to make it to their car.
It's a monster, and the monster's got to eat. This has been the worst fire season ever recorded in California's history. The whole town's literally burned to the ground.
I don't know if Trump and his administration even know about the Centaurians, honestly. And the reason why I say this is Pete Peterson, who was, again, called Dr. Do by Reagan and Cheney and Rumsfeld, that whole Reagan administration, he was their #1 technology advisor. He had an amazing ability to invent interesting stuff. His grandfather was Nikola Tesla's lab assistant. He learned all the Tesla patents and secret technology, and they trained him with a different high-level black ops scientist every year, 6 months training, 6 months internship, for like years of his life. So he has the equivalent of like multiple PhDs. And he invented a whole lot of really amazing classified stuff, because once you understand the technology that well, it dramatically opens up all kinds of new doors in terms of material science, in terms of computer technology, in terms of understanding chemistry, understanding how materials blend. You know, there's certain things he'd talk about all the time, like, you know, gallium arsenide and bismuth and all kinds of weird stuff. So regarding the Centaurians and what Pete told me about them, this is something that isn't necessarily going to be given to the President of the United States. The President of the United States is only at a certain level of classification, and you don't really learn most of what there is to know about the secret space program until you're at cosmic clearance, and cosmic is 35 levels of need to know above the President of the United States. What I did hear from Pete was that Trump will get cosmic clearance, but that they wait until you've been in office for 2.5 years. And that hasn't happened yet. That's next July. So part of what we have to do now is I wanted to communicate this to the Alliance through public media to let them know, if they didn't know, I can prove, if they wanted to bring me in and have me, play these tapes to them confidentially, I can prove that we've been talking about Paradise since 2007, and that I knew that this was the most important town in America for extraterrestrial human authorized immigration. And so something real fishy is going on here, and I highly suspect that Centaurians had decided they were going to come forward, introduce themselves to us. We get sort of the gentle disclosure where the first group that we meet are people that don't really look any different, but then they take the contact lens off and, oh my God, he's got a purple eye, is that true? And then doctors have to confirm it. They take the plate off, you see the little bumps on the bottom of their teeth. Oh my God, their teeth are different. Is this a joke? Did they sculpt it with a dentist? What's going on? With this fire now, it's like somebody sent them a message, because this thing's way too weird. We've never seen a fire like this before. And then for it to happen right after the mass shooting, which is clearly a setup, it's like the cabal wanted you to know that they did this on purpose. And they wanted to threaten extraterrestrial humans to make them afraid of coming forward. But I can tell you, if I understand anything about these people, and myself included, we will not be intimidated. We will not be silenced. Disclosure will not be stopped. We will take the losses, and we are going to move forward, and we are going to make this thing happen no matter what.